growing up, I always knew that education could catapult people through social and economic adversity. My belief wasn't just rooted in a philosophy. It was rooted in experience, my father's. He grew up in a poor part of Cairo, and his family couldn't afford the basics like electricity. So he had to study at night underneath a street lamp. He studied so hard that he did really well on his secondary school finishing exam. And then he won a place at a very prominent public university. And he graduated in the top 1% of his class. From there, he won an Egyptian national scholarship to do his graduate studies in the US. His real dream was to be a writer, but he had a large family to support. He had 8 brothers and sisters. So instead, he became a dentist for its more reliable income. His experience inspired me that education can dramatically change life opportunities. And that has been a very central belief for me throughout my life, except until the last 3 years. In the last 3 years, what I've seen is that although my belief holds true for many people around the world, it also definitely does not hold true for the hundreds of millions of young people who are unemployed or underemployed. I've spent the last 10 years working in education to improve system outcomes. And I was initially really excited about getting more students in school and raising literacy and numeracy levels and getting students graduated. But over time, what I realized is that education is not enough to be able to prepare young people for a better future. I've seen now too many cases of young people who go to school, study hard, graduate, do all the things that people ask them to do, only to find out too late that what they're left with is a degree that's a piece of paper rather than skills. And they're left with financial debt rather than promise. Young people today are graduating and they want to succeed, but they're not finding jobs. They want to be financially independent, and they want to make a positive contribution to society, but they cannot. This phenomena has led me to spend time over the last few years with employers to try to understand what is it exactly that they're looking for. What are the skills that they seek? Given the high levels of youth unemployment, you'd think the last thing that an employer has to worry about is finding talent, that it must be like fishing in a vast ocean. But the reality is, that's not the case. 4 out of 10 employers say to me that they cannot find the skills they need for even entry-level positions. This gap, this gulf that we have in the world between the skills that students have and those that employers seek is truly making us ask the question of what is the purpose of education? What are the skills that we should be teaching young people? And what are the roles of educators, employers, and young people themselves to be able to achieve these skills? These are the questions that have been whirling around in my mind, and I've now done surveys and spoken with over 10,000 employers, educators, and young people around the world to try to get at the heart of that. The more that I speak with them, the more that I realize that they're living in parallel universes. They each have a very different view of what's happening. And it's not that one is right and the other is wrong. They're just very, very different. I'd like to play a role in bringing these 3 universes together. And that begins by sharing their voices with you. I'm going to start with a young person. Her name is Yasmin. She's 24 years old, and she has 5 siblings and lives in a 2-bedroom home in Jordan. She was an above-average student in school, and her exam results tracked her into the economics program of a public university. No one ever asked her what her interests were, or tested her aptitude, or counseled her on the kind of impact that she could have in the world. And so she never asked herself these questions. She was just on a treadmill that went from school to university to lectures, and then she graduated. And it wasn't until after she graduated that she began applying to jobs. By the time I'd met her, Yasmin had applied to 30 positions. In most cases, she never heard back. And when she did, it was always some variation of her English skills weren't good enough, or she didn't have enough applied experience, or she didn't have enough work experience. In all of these cases, she always wasn't something enough. She sat at home for the last 2 years. She struggles every morning to wake up because she feels she has nothing to look forward to. At the tender age of 24, she feels that her life is wasted. She's angry, she's frustrated, and she doesn't know what to do. Now let me introduce you to an employer. His name is Mark, and he's the HR head of a manufacturing company in the US. His company has been increasingly automating its facilities, and so they have a need for mechatronics. Mechatronics is a combination of computer science, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, control engineering. It's a scarce breed of person, and not many education institutions create them today. On top of their technical skills, they also have to be very strong problem solvers, troubleshooters. They have to work effectively in teams. So Mark has approached community colleges and universities in his region to try to open this program. His conversations, though, haven't had much traction. And so after a while, he stopped trying. He still faithfully shows up at the career fairs, but he's always disappointed with the caliber of the talent that he sees in the engineers. And so he's resigned himself now to getting the talent he needs by poaching from competitors. That's Mark. Now let me introduce you to an educator. His name is Eduardo, and he's a senior administrator at a university in Mexico. He and his faculty want their students to graduate and get good jobs, but they also want them to be people who are effective in and positive contributors to society. They want them to use their time at university to get to know who they are as individuals. He hears the voices of industry, which say that they're not producing graduates with the right skills. But as he once said to me, we are a place of learning, not a tailor of employees. He's tried to start an apprenticeship program for juniors and seniors at the university, but he didn't see very much uptake from the employers, and so he stopped trying. He feels stuck between the academic mission and what employers want, and he doesn't know how to move forward. These stories of Mark, Yasmin, and Eduardo are replicated millions of times around the world. They each feel very valid in their point of view, and they each feel powerless to change their situation. And it doesn't matter if I'm in Cairo or Sao Paulo or DC, Mumbai, Joburg, the story is always the same. 2 things are true. The first is that youth feel unprepared. 1 in 2 youth around the world does not feel that their education prepared them to find a job. And the second is that the skills that employers value are often diametrically opposed to the skills that education institutions are teaching. The irony, the tragedy of this situation is that it is by design. The world has created a system of sequential and seemingly unrelated events where first education happens, and then employment happens, and there's very little interaction between the two. it's little surprise that we therefore have all these missed connections. It's little surprise that we have young people who are falling through the cracks every day. And it's much more acute for this generation than it has been in the past because job needs are evolving so quickly. What if we could make those missed connections happen? What if this looked different? We don't have to imagine it. There are a set of programs that we're beginning to see around the world that are enabling education providers and employers to work in a dramatically different way. Even in the hyper-competitive auto industry, we've seen how a leading company like Toyota actually created a list of the 170 skills that it believes any employee in an auto manufacturing context should know and understand and be able to do. They then voluntarily shared that list with all of their competitors and suppliers that they could agree at a sector level what was the talent that they needed. And then they partnered with education institutions to together deliver this curriculum so that half of it was delivered actually in the work context and the other half was delivered through the university or community college. There are examples like this which exist. The challenge, though, is that so far they're rare in that it only helps hundreds of people, maybe thousands. Very rarely does it help the hundreds of thousands and millions that we know need this kind of support. So what does it take to make this systemic? To the Marks and to the Eduardos of the world, to the employers and the education providers, you need to step into each other's worlds. Today, literally 1/3 of employers do not interact with education providers, and only 15% of them interact on a monthly basis. We need both of these parties to work together so that they are identifying the skills that matter most, both hard skills and soft skills, that they're creating simulations, physical, digital, whatever it takes in order to be able to support students to learn well. And then we need them to find ways to assess student proficiency in these skills based on demonstration, not on a paper bubble test. To the Yasmins of the world, to the young people, you and your parents are the consumers of education, but you have become the casualty. Literally 60% of young people do not know the job openings or wages that are associated with different professions, even for the ones that they've chosen. And even more so, when they have the data, they often don't use it. I was in a focus group a few weeks ago where students were presented with data regarding the job placement rates of a community college, and it was 15%, 20%. These students still decided to enroll in that community college because it was convenient to their lives. It was where their friends were going. It was a decision of path of least resistance, a decision of default. If we want better outcomes, we have to make different decisions. The best time to work on your job prospects is before you enroll in education, not after. Every time that I see a young person studying and working hard, I often, in my mind, go back to the image of my father underneath his street lamp. And I think about how the other kids probably made fun of him and how he probably shivered in the cold and wanted to go inside, but kept plowing through his studies because he wanted to make an opportunity happen for himself and for his family. Hundreds of millions of young people today face their own barriers to opportunity. Education cannot, should not be one of those barriers. We all need to do much better, educators, employers, and young people themselves, if education is going to continue to fulfill the promise that it has had for generations, the promise of opportunity. Thank you.